Yes, again, my name is Geraldine Frazier, and I'm with the mental health support group here in the church. And can you hear me back there? No? Say that again. They're working with this. I'm sorry? Y- Yes. Okay, I'll talk then. Again, I'm Geraldine Frazier, and we're going to get started with our event today. Um, Before we get started, we would like to have a word of prayer and with Mr. Scott. We need you here. He's going to open up in prayer for us.
Good evening, family. As we bow our heads, as we go to the Lord in prayer, I would like to take a moment to myself to meditate on how good God has been to me. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Father, I come to you giving you honor and glory and praise in your holy name. And to thank you, Father, just to say thank you for this day. Last night's laying down, this morning's rising up. I would like for you to bless this service, this meeting, Father, as we come together to learn and to understand grief and the things that we go through this time of season, Father God. Season of depression, Lord. Bless us, bless the speaker, and bless those all in the sound of my voice. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
The next speaker is me, but I left my notes, so if you all will excuse me a few minutes, I'll run and get my notes. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry. I just want to tell a little bit about who we are. We are the mental health support group here at the church. We've been in existence here since 2015, and we're still going strong and trying to get people help and help anybody who comes through to us and needs service. What we are a faith-based support group, and we hold our meetings at the every second and fourth, every second Tuesday and the fourth Thursday of the month. And it's from 5:30 until 6:30. So anyone who like to just come in and just chit-chat and just talk about things that are troubling you, and you'll meet people who are actually going through the same kinds of problems that you may be going through, and we'll just trade ideas and talk about things and see ways of trying to overcome what's bothering us. As a faith-based group, it's hard. We extend a warm invitations for you to join our group, where our mission is clear: to bring purpose out of pain. And then it's a safe haven for anyone who comes here. What is said in our group stays in our group. It is not a discussion for the outside world. It's for us to use and to accomplish success for what we want to do. What we expect, though, and it's time to pray, our collection system and source. We are quiet share activities, moments of peace and reflection. We learn and share discovering insights and manage challenges together. We share life experience, understanding, thoughts shared through journeys. And that's what a lot of us are going through when we have such stress and other burdens and things that are weighing us down. So without further ado, we'd like to go on into our next session and have Alicia come up and introduce the speaker.
Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for this evening, Dr. Aisha Evans. She's a licensed psychologist. She has served as the Associate Director of Community Engagement and Operations of Counseling and Psychological Services at the University of Cincinnati. In 2024, Dr. Evans earned the Village Keeper of the Year Award for her efforts in supporting Black students served by the African American Cultural and Resource Center at the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Evans graduated cum laude from Wright State University with a BA in psychology. She also earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Counseling. Dr. Evans is passionate about helping those students and those who are suffering with mental health stigmas in communities and those of color. She is currently a board leader for Mama Certified, which focuses on equity-centered maternal care. Dr. Evans is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, where she serves as committee chair. She enjoys traveling, listening to music, and spending time with family and friends in her free time. Let's all join me in welcoming Dr. Aisha Evans to the stage today. Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing today? Good, good. So we're going to spend a little time today talking about self-care during the holidays. So we'll be covering a few areas with that. The next slide, please. So I wanted to start out because I wanted this to be a little bit interactive. And I know we have some individuals online, and if you, I don't know if there's a chat function, but if there is, feel free to use it. But the question, if not, then you can also quietly reflect on the question. And the question that I have is, what comes to mind when you think of the holidays? Anybody want to share? Stress. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to combat that stress. But yes, holidays can definitely be stressful. What else? Family. Yes, yes. We're going to talk a little bit about that today too, how to deal with family, because sometimes it can be exciting being with our family, and other times, I'm going to use your word, it can be stressful. So, so we're going to talk about how to manage that. Any other things come to mind? Good food. Oh, yes, yes, yes. That's highlighted in the picture there. Okay. Did somebody else say something else? Grief, yes, yes. We're definitely going to talk about that today too, because, sadly through the years we can, we have these beautiful memories with our loved ones, and then we might lose them eventually. So we want to spend some time talking about that too, because while holidays could be joyous, they can also be sad as well too for individuals. So due to grief. All right, next slide, please. So, when we think about managing the holiday season, it's definitely a balancing act. There's a lot of different things that we're managing because, the holidays come once a year, but we still have all these other things that are happening in our lives. We have work or school responsibilities. Things can be very busy at work. A lot of times, if we're thinking about the holidays towards the end of the year, a lot of people's jobs are very hectic during that time of year for different reasons. Also, thinking about planning and decorating. I know some people make it a whole sport out of decorating their homes, but that can take a lot of work. It can take a lot of money. So that's something else to think about too. And just planning. I mean, just getting everyone together. I know someone mentioned family. Yes, we can love being with our family, but also it can be stressful trying to navigate everyone's schedule and everything like that. And then also just the everyday household chores that we have to do to keep our homes clean. Especially if we're going to be entertaining, we definitely want to make sure that our homes are looking nice and everything. And also to travel. Travel has just become so expensive. And just transportation, even if you aren't the one traveling, maybe you're the one that's managing that for your loved ones, like picking them up from the airport or from the bus station or whatever it is. And also just the caregiving role. How many of you all are caring for a loved one right now? Okay, so I see a few hands, and we know that is a full-time job, whether that's caring for a parent, another loved one, a child, grandchild, whatever it is, that takes a lot of work. And then trying to manage that along with, getting ready for the holidays, it can be a lot. And then also thinking about our religious or social activities as well too. Like you all are a part of this group. This is something that, you have to fit into your schedule, and then, other things that you might do in the church or in other social organizations and things that you have going on. Just managing all of that can be a lot. So how do you all manage all of those things? I'm curious. Anybody want to share? That's right. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share? You said talk to yourself? Yeah. Yes. I believe in things like that. Certainly like positive affirmations. Some people have ones that they say to themselves. They might tape them to their mirror. Whatever it is. As long as you're not talking back, you're okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So there can be a lot of different expectations surrounding the holidays. I know we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We want our holidays to be perfect, right? And like we know, nothing is perfect. So one of the things that we want to do is really embrace imperfection. Does that sound weird? No? Okay, good. So we want to make sure that sometimes wonderful things can come out of imperfection. Like maybe you might have this recipe that you've been using for a long time, and then maybe you might make a mistake. You might add a little more of something or a little less of something than you normally do. But it might actually turn out to taste better. So just, thinking about that, and then also just those other things that might happen. As much as we can plan, things may not come out exactly the way we want them to. So just kind of embracing that and accepting that, and knowing that it's going to be okay. And also giving grace to yourself and others. What do you think I mean when I say that? Prayer, yes. What else? I'm sorry, what'd you say? You said, yes, not being hard on people and not being hard on ourselves either. Exactly. And we'll talk a little bit about that too with our family. Like sometimes we have to accept our family for who they are, different things, different traits that they might have. So giving grace means, just not being so hard, not being so critical, just accepting that, we are who we are, they are who they are, and just really embracing that. And, and being forgiving as well, too. And then also remaining flexible. Like I said, it might not always be exactly how you want it to be, but just being open to change. And also communication. Communication is so important because you might have something in your mind how you want it to go for the holidays. Your family might have something else in mind, or your friends, or whoever you would be celebrating with. So just making sure that you all are communicating, you're all on one page about how you want things to be for the day. And also delegating. How many of us take too much on? And I'm going to raise my hand because I do too. Yeah, a lot of us do. We take too much on, right? And what happens when we take too much on? Yes, stress, overwhelmed, all of that stuff, right? And I mean, we've all experienced that at some point. So it is so, and how many of you consider yourself leaders, to be leaders in anything, Okay, so a lot of leaders in here. I think it's important that as leaders, or even just as individuals, that we delegate and we don't just take on everything, because we might be used to doing certain things, but that doesn't mean we always have to do them. Sometimes we can teach someone else. Like that recipe that I mentioned earlier, you could teach one of your family members, so maybe they can help you, or they can take it on, or whatever it is. So you're not doing everything yourself, because what happens is when we focus on too many different things, then nothing turns out how we would want it to be, or even maybe even what we consider to be good. Because have you all ever heard the saying, a jack of all trades, master of none? Yeah, so that's what it can be, is when we take on too much. So learn to let some stuff go. And also remembering your why. And when I say that, your why is what the holidays mean to you. Like, for some people, it might be because of their spiritual, religious faith, why the holidays are important to them. For others, it could be being with their family. For others, it could be giving back to the community. Maybe they volunteer during that time. Whatever your why is, remembering that. When you're making all these plans, remembering your why. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about financial difficulties during the holidays. Holidays are expensive. So and this isn't an exhaustive list, but if you look at this, these are some of the things that we might think about. How many of you have felt pressure before to give someone just that perfect gift? That one is going to bring that smile on their face. Okay, I see some people shaking their heads like, nope. And I see a hand. Did you want to share? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we care about somebody, it's natural to want to give them something that they're going to enjoy. It's going to put a smile on their face. So something else that can cause financial pressure is travel. As I said, travel is expensive. And it can be tough, especially if you have family in different areas or areas that are far, far away from here. It can be tough trying to manage, how can I make it to see them? And also the groceries for the holiday meals. I went to the grocery store today. I spent $90. And I said, what did I get? A small stack of stuff for $90. I mean, it's getting more and more expensive. And the food for the holidays, it isn't any cheaper, especially if we're talking about buying in bulk for a lot of different family members, to feed multiple people. It can just be so, so expensive. And then also inflation. Things are going up. They keep going up. Paychecks aren't matching that. But also, end of year expenses, unexpected expenses. How many of you were unpleasantly surprised when you got your gas and electric bill this past month? Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. 'Cause, we're heating our homes, our bills are going up for that. And also just debt, We're thinking about getting holiday gifts, buying food. We already have the other debts that we may have, and then that just accumulates. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways to manage some of these obstacles. One of them is remembering your goals and planning ahead. When I'm saying remembering your goals, I mean your financial goals. Like, what is your financial goal for the following year? Like for me, I want to hopefully purchase my own first home. And in order to be able to do that, I have to plan ahead. And I have to, when I'm thinking about the holiday season, I have to remember that and think, okay, how much can I afford to spend while also working toward my goal for next year? So that's really important, first and foremost, and making sure that all of our bills are paid. Before we even think about getting any holiday gifts, let's make sure the bills are paid because, we want to keep the lights on and all of that. So also, budgeting and setting limits. People may have grand ideas. I don't know how many of you have children, grandchildren. They might be coming to you with a long list right about now. But it's important to set limits, like for how much you can spend. And also saying no. And saying no can look like a lot of different things. It could be saying no to hosting. It could be saying no to to buying an expensive gift. It could be saying no to traveling if it's not feasible. So sometimes as much as we may want to do something, that may not be feasible for us at that time. And also using local resources. I keep talking about the expenses tied to food. And something to think about is that there are a lot of different agencies out there and organizations that give out holiday meals. They give out groceries to have that meal with your family. And there's also places that actually give out home-cooked meals that you can go to as well, too. So just remembering that and taking advantage of those resources. And there's also, I mentioned the heating bill. There's resources to help with that, too, as well, like community resources. Also thinking about potluck. As much as you might like your own food, because no one can make that mac and cheese like you can, or whatever it is, remembering other people can cook, too. Yeah. So allowing people to contribute, to bring things. And our default is to say, no, you don't have to bring it. Yes, they do. And, and doing a collection. And when I say a collection, I mean, like, let's say if you're hosting and maybe, like, when I had a family reunion a while back, we had everyone, each family sent in, I don't know, like $20 or something like that. and we use that to buy the food. And we all cook the food together. So doing things like that, you can do that as well too. And then also seeking support. I like having an accountability partner or accountability buddy. If I know that I want to keep a rein on those finances, I want to make sure I'm not spending too much. It's nice to have somebody that you can kind of check in with. And also using Secret Santa or a gift exchange. My mom's family is huge. And so what we would do is instead of getting a gift for everybody, we would pull a name and you would get a gift for that person. So that can really cut down on that expense as well too. And also focusing on experiences. You know, when we're thinking about how many times have we gave someone a gift and they just sat it down and they might have used it initially, but then they just sat it down and just never used it again. So sometimes I believe in experiences, like that'll have more of a lasting memory, like doing something together, making a memory together, as opposed to just buying a bunch of materialistic things that they're not going to use anyway, or that they'll go out of style or whatever it is. And also going back to the basics. My dad, I ask my dad every year, like, Dad, what do you want for Christmas? And he'll say to me, oh, I want a pack of socks. I want a pack of T-shirts or something like that. And I'm like, Dad, is that really what you want? But it is. That's what he wants. You know, and those things, like, it may not be the most glamorous gift, but when it's cold outside, he's appreciating those socks or those T-shirts or whatever it is. So remembering those basic things too, that we can give to others. And then also getting creative. How many of you are artistic in here or know how to make things? Okay, a few people. Well, first of all, I envy you. And second of all, that's nice because that can save you money. And that's something that they're not going to just be able to go out in the store and buy. You know, you're giving them something that's unique. It's one of a kind, and that's priceless. Next slide, please. So I want to transition a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about, because somebody mentioned this earlier. They said kind of accepting a family member for who they are, accepting a person for who they are. So I have another question, and that's, think about a difficult conversation, and you don't have to share anything, you know, that you don't feel comfortable sharing, but just think about a difficult situation that you have, or a difficult conversation that you have had, or that you plan to have in the future with a family member, and what strategies do you think you might use for that type of thing? Yes. Yeah, that's really deep. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that's really difficult to watch. Yeah. Almost like watching a train wreck or something just happening and feeling like there's not much you can do about it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. Waste is a serious problem. And, you know, something that I saw, I was eating at this cafeteria on campus. I work at a university. And they had this bucket. and it was like or a dishpan or whatever it was. And they had everybody put their waste in there so you could visually see what's wasted. So maybe trying something like that might be helpful. So there's a visual, I mean, it won't be pretty to look at, but I mean, it is a visual representation of the waste. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. That's a good point, having like 20 different dishes. We don't need all that. And our cholesterol doesn't need all that either. So, yeah, I like that idea for sure. And also having people designated to serve. Like, okay, you're going to waste food? Guess what? We're going to give you your portions of what you get. And if you eat that, you can come back for seconds. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All of those things, yes. Mm. Yeah, but I really love your suggestion about praying, because that can really, what that can do is help to ground us. You said, take a moment, take a pause, you know, and that's so important. Instead of just jumping into the conversation, prayer, I love that idea, meditation, any of those types of things where we can just steady ourselves and ground ourselves before having the conversation. Just cut out all the noise, I think is really important. Any other strategies that you all might use? We're going to move on to the next slide. So these are just some ideas that I had. Again, not an exhaustive list. But I believe timing and the location is everything. So choosing a location and a time where it feels appropriate, where the person may not feel as caught off guard by the conversation, and also making sure that we prepare beforehand. I know we're not robots and we don't go into conversations like with a script or anything like that per se, but we can think about, okay, what are some key points that I want to get across? Like I really, with your example, maybe sharing about how that impacts you, seeing that, seeing that behavior. So maybe jotting some things down. And also using active listening. How many of you have heard of active listening before? Okay. What is that? Yeah. Yeah, so it's making sure that you're listening and communicating that you're listening. Doing things like making sure that you're maintaining eye contact, making sure that your body posture, that you're maybe leaning in a little bit or whatever it is, just showing that you are hearing them. And then also using I statements. How many of you have heard of I statements before? Good, good. So yeah, so instead of saying, you, like I'm pointing, because it's like pointing a finger. When we say, you did this, you did that, how does it feel to hear somebody say that to you? Yeah, it's not good, right? So making sure that we're focusing on our emotions. Like, I feel like, for your example, like I feel angry when food is wasted, because it's true, right? So yeah, so expressing, because one thing people can do, people can, disagree with you about what was said or what event happened or whatever it was, but nobody can say or tell you how you feel. So just remembering that, focusing on the emotions and sharing your emotions. Also, did you have something to say? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can improve and really strengthen our relationships, having those conversations. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And, sometimes just agreeing to disagree. Like, for example, we just had an election that happened, and I have never seen an election that has been this polarized. And I imagine at some holiday dinners, there's going to be some tension. So that's what I suspect. So yeah. So sometimes we have to come to a point where we just agree to disagree. We're never going to see eye to eye on this. We're never going to fully agree on it. So, hey, we'll just agree to disagree. What is that? Well, that's a fact. Yes, that is a fact. So, and then also respecting boundaries. Like, for example, someone may not like people in their personal space. If someone tells you that, then, really taking that in. And also taking a break if needed. Sometimes people feel the need to just push through the conversation, and that can actually make things worse and make us say things that we may not have said if we had thought a little more. So taking a break, maybe saying, hey, I'm going to take 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to take a walk around the block, and I'll be right back, and we can finish the conversation rather than just trying to continue and just things escalating. So those are just some suggestions for having the difficult dialogues. And, I think it's important to have these conversations, because sometimes we can just kind of push things under the rug. And while there might be a temporary solution, it's definitely not permanent, and it really does impact our relationships in a negative way when we aren't being honest with one another, when we aren't having those conversations. In fact, we may be having them with other people, and that can be impactful as well too. So just making sure that we're communicating with our family members as well, and just, you know, having those conversations, as hard as it might be. Next slide, please. So I want to get to something you all had mentioned a couple times, and that's coping with loss or grief. For some, this might be the first holiday after a major loss, and that can be difficult. You know, it can be really difficult. I wouldn't say any year without someone is easy, but that first year is usually the hardest. Just like the anniversary of when we lost that person, it can be really, really tough. And, you know, whether that be through death, through a breakup, or whatever it is, you know, a divorce, it can be really tough. And there might be constant reminders of that person's missed presence. Like, for example, if we're thinking about the dinner table, maybe for holidays, everybody, you know, a lot of families, we have the seats that we sit in. You know, me, my parents, my brother, we all have seats that we sat in. So if one of us is missing, that would really take a toll, having that empty chair there. It's like a visual reminder of that person not being there. And, you know, we have family roles, things that we take on. Like, for some of you, what are some of your family roles that you have, that you do? Like, for thinking about holidays. Yes?
Well, it used to be that the young people cleaned up and went around and got the elderly plates and stuff like that and cleaned up the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, the teenagers are gone before it's time to clean up the kitchen.
Yeah.
So we still
Yeah, so picking up the dishes and that type of thing. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. Yeah, and that's an important job, kind of what you alluded to, like, people, no one wants to be there once the meal is finished, you know, people usually disappear, so that's really important. And yeah, just thinking about that, the family roles changing when we lose that person. You know, maybe it's a phone call, not receiving that phone call that we receive normally on the holiday from them, even if we didn't normally get together with them. And it might require us to take on new roles or provide support to other people. And I mean, it can be taxing on us. And then traditions changing as well, too. Like when we lose people, I had a presentation recently, someone brought up like a matriarch, like what happens when we lose our matriarch. And usually, I mean, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times things tend to fall apart. We don't tend to get together as much anymore and do some of those things that we used to do. So thinking about all of that, and then also just having challenges with going to the social gatherings. It may not feel the same once we lost that person. We may want to be by ourselves. We may want to isolate ourselves. Also triggering memories as well, too. It could sometimes be the simplest things that remind us of someone that we lost. And then also guilt. And when I say guilt, I don't mean guilt as in, you know, it's your fault that you lost a person or anything like that. I mean guilt about you still being able to be here, enjoy the holiday without them. Or you feeling like, well, I can't be happy because they're not here, you know. So thinking all of those different things, it can be really, really, really tough. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when it's their time, it's their time, and we don't have, sadly, we don't have any control over that. Mhm. Yes.
Since we're dealing with grief, how, you're on the outside, so how do you deal with grief and you on the outside, say of a relationship? Say you in a relationship and this person is always dealing with the loss of a loved one, a pet, a child, or something like that. But you can't tell a person how long to grieve, that's true. But how do you, as a person on the outside that's not dealing with grief or never dealt with grief, deal with that?
That's a really good question. I think the short answer to your question is with patience. As you said, there's no set amount of time that it takes to grieve. So I think, first of all, being patient with the person, understanding that there are going to be, some days are going to be more difficult than others. And finding that balance, and it's going to be different for everybody, but finding that balance between supporting them, spending time with them, connecting with them, and also giving them space. Because while we don't want to completely isolate ourselves when we're grieving, we also need space to ourselves too. So working to kind of find that balance for you and whoever that, loved one might be, what will work best. And also, I think something else is, yes, while we can't put a timetable on grief, we also have to recognize that sometimes people need support that we can't give to them. So being aware of resources, and I'm going to speak a little bit about that in a little bit, but what resources are available, and being able to not only be aware of what they are, but also having that conversation with them. If we notice that, it's been a couple years or whatever it is, and they still haven't made any progressions in their grief process, maybe it might be time for them to get some support. So really just keeping yourself close to them, and also being able to offer some of that support, and knowing when it's outside of what you can do or what you can offer. So finding that balance. Does that answer your question? Awesome. You're welcome. Next slide, please. So how many of you have heard of the 5 stages of grief before? All right. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she came up with these 5 stages of grief. And the important thing to note is they don't occur in order all of the time. And we can go back and forth between the different stages. So if we think about the 5 stages of grief, one of them is denial. And that's when we don't believe that the event really happened. We're in denial about it. We cling to some alternative, like, well, maybe this didn't happen. Maybe I didn't really lose this person. Or maybe I'm not going to lose this person, if we're thinking about anticipatory loss. And then sometimes we might even isolate ourselves when that's happening. And then we get into anger. And that's when we become frustrated. We're like, well, why them? Why, it's not fair. Why did I lose this person? And sometimes people can even lash out during that time, like at staff members, like if they're at a medical facility, or other loved ones, family, anybody close to them, they might lash out at. And then we get into the bargaining phase. It's like, almost if we think about like a negotiation, it's like, well, if you don't take this person away from me, if we're thinking about anticipatory loss, if you don't take this person away from me, then I'll stop doing this behavior. I'll stop gambling or whatever it is that, might be doing. And then we get into depression. And that's really a hallmark of grief. When we think of grief, we think a lot about what? About sadness, about depression, right? So with this one, it's feelings of despair. And sometimes people might even want to, as difficult as this is to think about, some people might even want to join their loved one when they're in the throes of the depression, the throes of the sadness. And this is really, really when people, again, can be more isolated, not want to be around their loved ones and that type of thing. And then we get into acceptance. And that's the final stage, and that's when, not to say that we like that we lost the person, because we're never going to like that we lost someone that we care about, but we accept it. Whatever this new normal is for us, we start to accept it. So those are the 5 stages of grief. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about ways to cope with loss. And one of them is to sit with your feelings. That might sound scary for some, but it's just so important to really just sit and just be in touch with how we're feeling. And I know it can shift from day to day, from moment to moment, but just being aware of that. And also using your resources as well, too. I'm going to share some resources in a moment, but just knowing that there's support out there. Like individual counseling, group counseling. There's groups just for people who experience grief. And, there's therapists that specialize in grief therapy. And also modifying the traditions and making new ones. We don't have to, like, for example, if maybe the person that we lost, maybe they would cook large home-cooked meals. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you and the rest of the family members don't want to do that. So maybe you might try something new. And also there might be, thinking about ways in which you can modify traditions. Maybe there might be a recipe that they used to make. Maybe you all can make that together, or just finding new ways to have traditions with one another. And also setting boundaries as well, too. Knowing how much you can handle. Sometimes you may want that time to yourself. And also making sure that you are seeking support. Like, again, not isolating yourself, connecting with people who you care about. And also practicing self-care as well, too, is very, very important. Next slide. So I do want to share some resources, some grief resources. And the first 2 are local resources, but the rest of them are national. So I'll just let that sit for a second. And again, just remembering not only for yourself, but also for others, like knowing what resources are available is so, so very important. Next slide, please. So something else to think about is, I mentioned self-care. So when I think about self-care, there's so many different activities that could be self-care, but there are 3 that I consider to be your fuel. These are the things that give us energy, that allow us to go on from day to day. And these are my 3 that I focus on with my clients. I focus on sleeping, eating, and physical activity. And when I say physical activity, I mean whatever you're capable of doing. We all have different abilities and that type of thing, so just whatever you can do. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. And thinking about just self-care in general, I did have a list. not an exhaustive list, because there's hundreds of things you could do for self-care. But I'm curious, what are some self-care strategies that you all engage in? What are some things that you do to take care of yourself for yourself? Anybody want to share? Yes. Yeah. That's right. Doing it just for you. And I saw your hand too. I love that. Yes. Oh, nothing wrong with that. Yes, we can date ourselves, for sure. Yeah, it's important to take ourselves out on a date. Thank you all. So yeah, these are just, and just to name a few, I mentioned meditation, mindfulness, practicing gratitude, remembering that we have things to be grateful for. Solving a puzzle, it could be anything. Next slide. So I want you all to think about what is a self-care activity that you can commit to over the next 2 months. Why do you think I said 2 months? Yes, because of the holidays, right? So we want to make sure that, and next slide. Yeah, we want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves every day, but especially over the holidays, because they can be taxing. Hopefully you all can get some rest over the holidays. All right. And the next slide. Okay. One more. Okay. So I did want to share some mental health resources. I know there's some things out on the table out there, but just wanted to highlight some different resources that you all can use. And there is, and I apologize I didn't put it on here, but there is one that's therapy for black men. I see the therapy for black girls. There is one that's therapy for black men as well, too. And then also, at your job, you might have an employee assistance program. You get so many free sessions. And Psychology Today, we use them a lot. There's therapist finders on there that you can use. And you can even set your preferences. When I want a woman therapist or whatever it is, you can set your preferences. And one thing that I do want to highlight is because if we're talking about grief and loss, we want to make sure that, yes, we're taking care of ourselves, but also if we get to a point where we experience a crisis or when we are experiencing suicidal thoughts, I know that's a taboo word, but I think it's important to say it. Because it's real. It's real. So when we have those types of thoughts, we need to know there's somebody that we can call 24/7. And yes, we can call on the Lord, and we can also call on supports as well, too, that are designed to support us during those times. Yes.
If you know somebody that might be going through some things, it's a good idea to just call and check on them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people have committed suicide and have family or friends, but nobody noticed that they were going through that until they committed suicide. So I always think it's a good idea to just be aware of people and just take time to check on them, because sometimes that's what they need is that phone call or to take them out to lunch or something like that and give them a chance to express what they're going through.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. It could be something as simple as, how have you been doing? I've been thinking about you. And that can make all the difference in the world. Just knowing that somebody is thinking about you, that somebody cares about you, because sometimes when people do complete suicide, even though they might have loved ones, they still might feel alone. So just reminding them, you are not alone. You have somebody here to support you. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so I am at the end of my presentation, and I think we're going to open it up to questions now. Yes.
Pointed out to talk to, call a friend and let them, tell them how you feel and knowing that they are having a difficult time. One of the things that we need to understand and is learning how, or knowing how to approach that person, how to talk to them, so that you can help them bring out some of their grief or some of their heartfelt problems, so that you won't leave them standing with feeling worse than they did when you first started talking to them. What suggestions would you come up with on that?
So I think, in having these conversations, it's really important to start out with, if there are things that you have been, because you do want to, yes, you don't want to leave them feeling worse after the conversation, but you also want to find that balance between that and then also being honest as well, too. So, if you've been seeing things, like maybe you notice that they haven't been as social lately, they've been missing work, whatever it is, gently pointing those things out to that person, like what you observe, why you're concerned about them, and also letting them know that you're there for them, and giving them space, not making assumptions about how they feel, but asking, how are you feeling truly? Because I think sometimes we get into a default. If somebody asks, how are we feeling? What do we typically say? Fine. Yes, I'm good. Yeah. So letting them know, like, you don't have to, if you're feeling fine or feeling good, that's fine. But if you're not, that's okay too. So letting them know that it's okay to not be okay. And if you feel, not to make it about you or anything like that, but, if you have anything that you want to share, like maybe you've been through a difficult time and maybe something was helpful for you. So maybe sharing, I went through a difficult time myself and it was helpful for me to go to therapy, or something like that. Just giving an example to them can be helpful. And, we certainly don't want to minimize people's pain or anything like that. But I think maybe talking with them about, is there anything that's coming up for them that maybe they're looking forward to? Or, asking, is there anything that brings you joy? And if it's something maybe the two of you could even do together. Just kind of having those conversations with them, I think is important. So being honest, but also the conversation, it doesn't have to end on a sad note. You can certainly talk about things that might bring them hope as well too. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I can run. So I think, I know we talked about a lot of different things today. And if there's just one thing that I want you all to walk away knowing is just remembering As challenging as these times can be, just remembering to take care of yourselves, remembering to support those around you, because, we're at a time now, it's a difficult time. And it's just really, really important that we're loving on one another, and that we're providing support. So just remembering to engage in self-care. Really, I know I asked a question about what you can commit to. I hope that you all do commit to some type of self-care over the next couple of months. Take some time to rest. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for having me today. And it's been a pleasure. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season.
Yes, Dr. Evans, we really appreciate you coming out to the church and to our mental health ministry. We want to thank Alicia Trimmer for suggesting Dr. Evans. She edified you, and I just thank you so much. I want to thank the church family for coming out and all those on our social media platforms. But we thank you, and we take all the information that you have provided for us. So if we could give her a hand again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, and if there's any questions on our social media, feel free to contact the church and just leave a message for our mental health ministry. And if you have questions for Dr. Evans, just leave a note, and we'd be sure to give her that information. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Evans. And again, I'm Maxine Robinson. I'm co-chair of the mental health ministry. And did you want to say anything, Sister Geraldine? Okay, well, we thank you this evening, and you all have a happy holidays. And don't let it stress you out, and take all the tips that she has provided. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.